Alright, so when you look at Illustrator the first time, it should look pretty much like this. You have some menu about a new file, open, you can open a file, but yeah, we haven't created any file yet, so we can start here. I don't recommend this to use this except you know what you do. I would actually go here into more presets, just I think it's better to explain stuff. There are already these presets, and what I would be thinking first is how do you later use the file you're creating. So if you're using it for pure printing, and you have certain settings which are important, or you use it for film and video or for web only and so on. I recommend, if you don't know yet exactly, I would because it's also just changing here the settings, and you can always revisit the settings or change the settings later on. What I would do is, and especially in the industry where where I'm working in, which is design, I would probably use either web. If I know the presentation is on the web, it's online, the client won't probably print anything, then I probably would use this. But normally I would probably go for a bigger size because the pixels are mostly tailored to screen sizes. I would probably go to art and illustration, but please feel free to explore the others. In that case, normally very useful is either a customized size, but I think the A3 size is pretty decent. One, you can of course customize it, but it has a good size to be printed but also be used on the web if needed. So if I would go here and check the pixels, you actually see it could have a bit more pixels really, but let's keep this in millimeters for now. It's a better reference. You can always switch between these. You can always look at pixels or millimeters. These are just the units, but it's good to keep in mind how big things are. And there are more settings here. If I would compare that with a 4K film, for example, has way more pixels than an A3 document. But we are in vector graphic, so keep in mind that the pixels here also just have an effect when you print or when you export your stuff to, let's say, JPEG or another raster image format. Then this matters. Otherwise, we can always specify on how large we want to print things. And since we work in vectors, we can always scale bigger and smaller without losing the quality. In any case, let's stay with the A3 for now. You can give it a name, and you can choose the orientation. You can choose the artboards. I will tell more about artboards later. You can have any amount of artboards. The bleed we can talk more in detail later also. Just very quickly, you can choose a bleed which is an offset from your artboard and specifying the size. It's useful especially in print where you want to make sure that if a paper is trimmed, it doesn't have any white stripes on the sides. So it's always, your images are always overlapping a little bit, or your graphics or images are always overlapping a little bit. You can choose here to link, to break the link or link these the offsets together, so that's on all sides is always the same offset. Color mode, this is the most important, I think. People just don't understand. RGB and CMYK are different color spaces. RGB is used mainly for film, mobile, and I would always stick to RGB because it has a bigger color. It's a bigger color space than the CMYK color space. CMYK color space is specifically for printing. But even the newer printers, they can translate RGB very, very well, and it's advised to use RGB color if you use your document on screen, on the web, as a presentation file on the web, in Zoom meetings, for example. Then please stay with RGB. Otherwise, your colors will be dull, more dull than with the RGB color space. So keep that in mind. I will only use CMYK if I really know what I'm doing and when exact colors really matter for the printer and when you want to compare the print with the real colors. But if this is not important, don't use it. Screen, again, The screen, the pixel per inch is the resolution really, but in that case, because we using vectors, this is less important at the moment. We can talk about it in another video. Preview mode we can also talk about in another video, so we keep that just as default. And there are more settings, so we can choose here more settings. Some you have already seen, and I will not go through much more in detail here. You can, for example, choose how the artboards are arranged on your screen, and I think you can also save your template but yeah, let's create the document. All right, so we have 3 artboards. It's interesting how it was arranged, and the red line here, this is the bleed. That's what I was talking before. There's different ways to navigate. Here you can, with the mouse wheel, you can scroll up and down. With pressed mouse you can zoom. Pressed left mouse button, zoom. With right mouse button you can choose more settings. With the pressed wheel button you can pan everything. And I will go a little bit through shortcuts, but I will mainly show you the interface, because I believe that shortcuts are very important. They are very important, but first we need to understand what the project is capable, and then understand where we're gonna get the information of the shortcuts. Because in some courses I realized people talk right away about shortcuts, but then by the time you start your project you have forgotten where they are, and you don't really know, and so and then it's frustrating because you remember, oh, there was a shortcut for this tool, and if you don't know the shortcuts, you will never find the tool again. So I believe that it's better to start with finding the tools within all these dialogues first, and being able to go from there. Okay, what can we see here? So we have the typical Windows menu on the top, file, where you can save, open, new from template, you can save your files, you can export, you can place stuff into it, you can change the document settings, we just looked at, so we can change stuff here. We can, for example, change this back to 0 if we want. Let's do that. I don't like that at the moment. We can change it always back. Every settings can be adjusted. That's really good. We have the edit menu, where you can do undo, and you always see the shortcuts here on the side. That's what I was talking about before. Shortcuts are very important, but it's good to learn how to find the shortcuts. So I will not go through each item here, but it's good to know where things are again. You can paste. There are a lot of different ways to paste stuff in. You can paste from one output to the other. You can paste in place, means at the same location. Paste in back, paste in front. There's a typical, very useful tool, find and replace. We have spelling, we have all kinds of other settings here, print presets, presets, color settings, and so on. But if you already set your color settings, then you can, if you know already now, okay, we are in CMYK or in RGB, then you don't need to really change that here. You could probably maybe want to change the settings for your, depending on where you live. I'm in Europe, so I could, for example, go here and change to Europe and general purpose. This is a very big topic. Color spaces is a very big topic, and we might not be able to cover that in this video. Just think about where you live. It's not that you can also have a custom adjustment here. Just think of what fits best to you. There's a very useful tab here, a very useful menu here. It's the preferences menu, and that I would have a look here really when you start out, and you can just open this. It's the same menu as you just saw, just as a list here, and you can just click through. General, it change much but it's very interesting to see what you can also adjust. This is not about your project settings, but how Illustrator works. It's about types, units, in general, units in millimeter, smart guide, slices, hyphenation, plugins, scratch this. Here, this is very useful to manage where Illustrator stores temporary files. So if you have very little space in your C drive and you have another drive with loads of space, then you probably want to change to another one, or you can specify a secondary. I could, for example, put here the D drive, my only secondary drive as a drive in case I'm running out of space on the first one. The plugins we can talk about another time, and this will affect the next time I start Illustrator. So I will not need that now, but I will keep it. User interface, performance, file handling. This is important. Don't turn this off. You want to have Illustrator save your work, and it does it in the background. And you can also see here where if it crashes and you can't recover it, you can always go into the folder and check if you maybe find the latest, the last recovery file. And you can also change that. You can choose a different folder if you want. I think this is quite important to know. The appearance of black, we can talk about another time. Devices. I don't have a vacuum, but I have another drawing tablet. I'll just keep it. I think it's fine. That's what you can find in the edit tab. Objects, this is all about the objects you draw, and we will go through these in more specific at some point. Type, this is about type, fonts, and when you type text, special characters, glyphs, what kind of fonts are available, the font size, and so on, and more. The select, this is a very useful and very underrated menu. There are lots of ways to select objects in Illustrator. Some of them are super useful, people don't know. Effects, I'm using, but not that much. We also will go through these. And then the view, there are other very important settings, for example, smart guides and how the snapping works, snapping to different objects or to create pixel points and so on. And then Windows helps to arrange your workspace and open additional menus. For example, the layer menu, which is already here. It's interesting, isn't it? Now it shows it's on, but you could, for example, also put properties. Now properties is up here. Layers, libraries. You could, for example, add something here. Attributes, or let's say actions, and you can always like arrange these. You can change it. I see this as my main library, and then I can add other stuff here. Artboards, that's a very useful one. There's loads of ways on how to organize your workspace. We can also talk about this a bit more in the future. What else? Yeah, we have the layers here. At the moment there's just one layer. That one layer works for all three of these artboards. Actually, if you zoom out a lot, this is the frame of your workspace, and then within you have artboards. So Windows, we talked about Windows very quickly. There's more, of course, brushes. That's something useful. So you can, whatever you use, you can always place here. You can also search for tools, tutorials, and so on. Fonts. There's a lot you can look up here. You can arrange documents if you have more documents open. Two similar documents and you want to compare them, you can arrange them here. And you can also switch to workspace. I think for that course and for starting out, I feel like the Essential Classic workflow is actually the better one, which gives you quite a lot of information right away. So it actually changed here quite a lot. So now I basically activated the Essential Classics. Now you see another work panel here, which always gives you information about the current tool you're using. I think that's very useful when you start out. I don't know why they put it on Essential, because Essentials it's very hard for somebody who starts. I mean, you can always double click here and get some information about what that does, but I feel like the Essential Classic mode is the better one. At the moment, nothing selected. As soon as I will use some of the tools, this will change. What I don't like with this setting here is that I don't have the layers. I have the layers here, which is okay, but I would like to have the layers maybe here. So I can add the layers here. And I don't need the libraries at the moment, so I can place the libraries here. I also don't need the properties for now. So let's have just the layers here, and maybe we have the swatches here as well. You can swap between these, and then you have other additional menus on how to work with these. You can also minimize that, extend this. So loads of options on how to work with this. If I create a new file here, for example, this is now based on another preset, and I have these open, I could go here and change how they are shown. So you can arrange your documents here. I don't need that now, really, but yeah. You can also detach this here, or reattach it. So yeah, you have a lot of options. And then these are the tools. Let's talk about this here first. So again, we have the document setup directly available. This is the same as here, exactly the same. We have the preferences ready to check out. And then we have just very simple basic selection tools here for the color. It changes here as well. Or for the stroke. This is the stroke. And so we can select here with this drop down menu, we can select other stuff here, and we will talk about swatches and other color options here. There are loads of libraries we can look at. For example, let's choose something nice, one of my favorite colors. So it's my current color. I can add this color if I want. I can give it a name. You can also see which color space it is. But I could say I love turquoise. Turquoise is a nice color. Okay. I have my color specified here nicely. We will talk about this more, but yeah, that's the color I liked. Don't worry about any of these warnings for now. And then here we have our toolbar. Toolbar can be also detached. You can detach it anywhere you want. I like where it is, so I can just keep it here. That's fine. And let's talk about these. But before we talk about like creating stuff, let's talk about the artboards, because that's what we're working on now. It's the artboard, and we have this menu here. It's called Artboards, and we can give the artboards a name. They have a number, they have an ID, they have a number, but we can rename them, and we can rearrange that. That will have an effect on how it's export when you export the artboards, for example. But yeah, let's keep it as this, artboard 1, 2, and 3, that's fine. But we can also, again, we can rearrange these. Artboards were actually not, they don't exist that long, but they're very useful in my mind. They add a lot of functionality to the software, which was not available before. Alright, so this is one menu about artboards. This is about you can add artboards, duplicate artboards, delete empty artboards, and so on. You have a lot of options again. There's another one where we actually can work on the artboard we are working at the moment. So if I click here, artboard tool, then you actually see the names of the individual artboards, and the one you're working on has this like dashed box and it has the name in there, and we can change the size of the artboard. Not changing it, but if you go to these handlers here, you can change it. You can also change it here. Here it says A3, it's a portrait, it's the artboard number 1. You can move the artboard, and moving the artboard, we will talk more about it later. It also moves whatever is in the artboard. And you can specify that here. You can say move artwork with artboard. Artboard options. These are very similar to what we had here before. Again, it's about that specific artboard. We can rename it. If we rename it here, then we will see the name in the other menu. Course artboard 1. Then this is also here. Let's go back. Let's keep it. Reference points. We can change how we actually handle this artboard. If we, for example, scale it and so on, then it will scale depending on the location of that point. So for example, if we have our reference point here on this side, then when we scale it, change the size, it will change it with that point staying in place. We can also make sure that the proportions are always the same. If we change the size, the proportions of that output stays the same. There are these numbers here. This is the reference point location, and this is the actual size of the artboard. Rearrange, you can rearrange it. You saw that in the presets on how to arrange the artboards. You can rearrange them automatically, and you can change how many columns there are. So for example, if I put here 3, then it puts all the 3 artboards next to each other, nicely aligned. Okay, if I click anywhere here in the toolbar, then it jumps out of that menu and we are back in the drawing mode. And let's go very quickly through all these. In order to select stuff, let's actually draw something. And we can draw like a rectangle. Let's draw a rectangle. We need to press here. If you hover over here, you actually find the menu. Now, as soon as you draw this, you actually see, and it was drawn with these settings here, with that color and with this stroke, with a stroke size of 1. As soon as you draw this here, you can see other things here. You can see the opacity, the style, you can recolor artwork, align to artboard. Let's draw some more shapes. Maybe that helps to explain a bit more. Whenever I click these, you're gonna see automatically what's happening. And you can change stuff here. Shape, you can see the size, and there's a transform panel. You can isolate selected objects and so on. So now the selection tool is on. You can, if you select, get in this menu about, basically you're able to transform this entire shape by touching one of these handle points. You can move it around. As soon as it always depends on where you are with your mouse, it changes how it looks like, and then you know what to do. There's also this points here which allows you to change the fillet of either one or all of them at the same time. So if I click here, then it's just one selected and I can change it. Or if nothing is selected and I click here, then all of these corners will be affected. If I want to change something specific, you could go here and you can see then the exact vertices of that, or the vertex of that shape. You can change more here. Also in this menu, it's important to know that you can double click. Some of them you can double click, especially when then something is selected. So in that case, if I select this here and double click, there is another menu pops up where I can move objects around. It goes too far for the first video. Again, this is my selection tool and this is my direct selection tool, which also has a shortcut A. So you could use A, or you use V for the normal selection. And of course you can always, with Shift, you can always select more than one object. The same for the direct selection tool. You can also select more than one object, and you can change all of these at the same time. It's pretty cool actually. Further on the top here, if we can select one and we can change the stroke size. If we go in here, we get more information about the stroke itself, the cap, the corner, if it's round or not, if it has a bevel, or if it's just a corner. You can specify a dashed line. You can have arrowheads, especially for lines and so on. You can change the profile of the curve. That's quite interesting. There could be a certain profile to it, or like this. There are more ways to change your stroke kind of appearance. This looks like more like a pencil, like a brush stroke. And I guess there are way more here. Banners, lots of useful and not so useful things. Opacity, you can change opacity. We will talk about this a bit more in detail. There's different ways on how to use opacity, but the normal typical one is just changing the opacity. Opala, that was not what I want. Opacity. Of course the object need to be selected. Now I change this here, give it another color, and now I can change the opacity if it's selected. It's a big topic we can discuss much more in detail. In that case, the opacity always affects the entire object, meaning also the boundary or the border and the inside and the fill. But there are other ways we can adjust that your stroke is not opaque, is not transparent, and your infill is transparent. So there are a lot of ways to do that. There are ways to do that. Graphic style panel, we can look at it another time. There is the Recolor Artwork. That's very useful. Alignment is super useful as well. So you can align things so they are aligned either on the side, in the middle. And you can also align these to certain aspects. For example, you align it to the artboard or to the objects or to the selection. You know, or to the key object. So there are a lot of ways to work with this. You can have like a certain spacing in between, so they always have the same spacing. That's interesting. That's depending on your center point. So there are a lot of different ways you can work with. And we will touch shape and transform in another video. Selecting things. There is a very extensive selection menu, but also you can select objects with the same appearance, like with this tool. A shortcut is Y. You press Y, you can select everything with the same appearance. In that case, even though it has a different stroke size, it has the same color, so that's why it was choosing all three of them. The lasso tool, I think you know that from other programs, but you can use the lasso tool and select these. There's a shortcut which I want to really show you, because you can select all, or you can select all or deselect, and sometimes deselect it doesn't work as you want. So deselect is, so if you select stuff here, or for example you use Ctrl A, which select everything, to deselect is Ctrl Shift A, which is very useful, really. Also, when you, for example, if you work on one vertices of your object, it's also always good to deselect when you then want to touch something else. Lasso. Yeah, again we were the lasso tool. You can actually select stuff like this. Very easy. And it stays within the... So if I go here again, what's important that it only selected these points here. You can be very specific with what you select. Again, if I go here, it's selected the whole thing, but in that case it selected, for the direct selection, it selected only these vertices here. So if I move this around, you see that it moves all three of these. So there, yeah, again, there's a lot of stuff you can actually do with it. The pen tool, one of my favorite, of course, draws automatically whatever is in your specified here as a color. So you can draw these polygon shapes. Let's go to a second artboard here. And of course, if you don't want to have the infill, you can go here and you can just, whatever is in front, it will be affected by this. When I now press here none, then the infill is gone. You can also change that here. You can change the fill, infill, or no infill. And you can continue drawing by just selecting your tool again, touch the point, and you're ready to go. You can also keep the mouse button pressed at the second point, then you actually be able to draw curves with these handlebars. The curves are always continuous, which is very useful. And if I don't stay pressed, it just draws straight lines and straight corners. And you can always close it, of course. Again, there's more in there. You can see that the pen tool has more options. I can add anchor points, for example here, or I can delete them. Anchor points can be also modified and changed in the curves if I want to do that. So if I use this tool, I can actually change it by keeping clicked and drag. I can change it to a curve, and you can also individual change these. By the way, even these curves can be still modified with this fillet tools. Pretty cool is this. Whatever that is, I don't know. It's just a shape. And again, the pen tool has a shortcut. They all have shortcuts, and you can always see the shortcuts here. Another tool is the Curvature Tool. So it's a bit of a different way to draw. You draw point by point, but it automatically draws curves within, and you can continue even though you lost the point. So you just continue with clicking here again. So if it's like this, you want to continue here, it actually allows it to continue with that line. With that you can draw really nice curves and they're also static, so they don't have kinks anywhere. And of course I can still modify, same as before. Also I can modify it from the Curvature tool itself, so I can, go here and modify the curve as I want. I think it's a pretty decent tool. There's the text tool, of course. The type tool always has an automatic text in it. I will not cover everything for this, just the basics. You can have, again, you can change stroke sizes, which you probably don't want with text. Not always, sometimes maybe. Of course, you can change the color, opacity, same here. Regular, you can choose, of course, the font style. You can choose the text size. Oh, I need to select it. You can choose it if it's within the center, if it's bullet points. Also, you can align stuff and transform. Again, the text tool has more than just one tool in there. There's all kinds of deformation, or draw it on the path. For example, let's just show that how that works. There is a line tool. Again, I will not touch everything. Just play with it. We will touch stuff as soon as you get to. But there's a lot to learn about. Line tool. There's the line tool here. It works very similar, but it just creates one line. And by the way, you can always rotate stuff. I forgot. If you go onto like one of these edges here, or the points outside, then you can always rotate your object. The line tool, we talked about the shape tool, or this basic shapes. There are of course way more in there. There's automatic rounded rectangles where you can specify the exact fillet. You can change the corner type or the fillet type, bevel, or like a very specific inverted round. That's pretty interesting. You can always still manually change that. There's the ellipse tool. I think you can play with it. Polygon. If I place here, if I choose the polygon, then it's automatically here selected. Now if I draw the polygon and I use the up and down arrow, I can change the amount of corners it has. Small is this 3 corners. And there's a star tool. The star tool is also quite interesting. Same, you can change the amount here. If you go in here and you double click directly, there's also submenus you can get. Now you have the star menu. You can change the radius one, maybe to. Oh. Again, you can still use your the fillet tool, which is pretty awesome. But you can also change the radius of these. If you click, if you double click on here on the star tool, you can change how the radius works. So there are also always like additional functionality if you use these tools by, again, so for example here the star can be changed by the arrow up and down. You can change how many spikes you have. You can call it like that. You can also change the radius by pressing Control and Shift, and on a Mac probably different. I'm using Windows, sorry all the Mac users, I'm using Windows, but yeah, so there's lots of ways you can still work with these tools. You can also then, for example, select here these inner corners and change them to have a very specific star shape. Pretty interesting. What else? Maybe the polygon tool. So if I have the polygon tool on, again I can change the amount of corners. With Shift it stays perpendicular to or parallel to your screen. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just some small details in each of these tools, which makes it quite powerful. There's also the paintbrush or the blob brush. Paintbrush, it creates there's the difference between the two is that the paintbrush creates a stroke with a certain style. It's a stroke with this kind of definition. and you can also create your own, could create your own styles probably. I haven't really looked at that much. There's also the blob brush, which is sometimes actually much more useful, because what the blob brush does, it actually creates a shape. So it's not a stroke, it's a shape, which could have a stroke. It's a very useful tool. Running out of space here. So now I can show you how that works with the artboards. So I can, for example, here go the artboard tool, select artboards, and with Alt I can duplicate that. Now I have 3 more artboards with the same stuff on it, but that's fine. There is another tool here. Okay, we looked at this. Again, it has shortcuts. You want to maybe learn at some point. If you use a tool all the time, it's good to learn the shortcut. There's another tool, it's the shaper tool. Within the shaper tool, there's other things here. It's the pencil tool, the smooth tool, path erase tool, and join tool. The shaper tool is interesting. I haven't used it too much, and it's worth a complete video, but very quickly you can, for example, draw here something like a circle, and it detects that this is a circle. Pretty interesting. Or you draw like something like a rectangle, it's automatically a rectangle. Also way that if these things overlap and you use the shaper tool to draw a line here, oh, that's not what I want, and you draw like a line in between where they overlap, then it becomes one object with one outline. Don't be fooled though, it's still 2 objects, because I can still change where this object is in relation to the other one. And in that case, the shape tool is, yes, it is one shape, but it's actually 2 objects with a combined boundary. I could go here into the shape, into the object here and shape, and say expand shape, and now it's gonna be one object. Now, sorry, yes, here, expand. So if you go here, it's all here. That's why I like to use the Essential Classic workspace as a beginner. It's much better. So if we have this selected here, we could here go and expand, and now it's one object. Pencil tool, I use the pencil tool quite a lot. It's very similar to the Curvature tool, although in Curvature tool you paint or you draw points, and you can combine these all together and create one curve. So they're interchangeable. And now you saw that actually it's modified my stroke slightly, because this stroke is much more jittery. If I go here and double click, sometimes this double click is not working. It's not very consistent. It either works sometimes here directly, or you need to go in the menu below. Just be aware that there are submenus or options, and you can change the fidelity of that. Either more accurate than what I drew, or more smoother. If I go more smoother and I draw now, it becomes more smooth than if I would use a high accuracy. Okay, I like to use more smooth, somewhere in between. There are other options, of course, you can use, but automatically these are set to have no infill. You can also reset to the standard default values. What else is here? We have the pencil tool, smooth tool. It can smooth out more harsh corners. For sure, it has more options here. You can also choose the fidelity and the smoothness. Okay. Path eraser tool, join tool. We'll look at it another time. Eraser tool, very straightforward. You can erase stuff. It doesn't work, of course, for certain objects. It doesn't work, for example, like that. But it works for objects where they can be shortened. There's another tool, scissor. For example, I can cut things here and then have segments of that thing. There's another tool, the knife tool. I like. You can cut things out. This becomes one object. You can also cut straight lines with a knife tool. If you press Alt, it stays a straight line. And be aware that it's still one object here. I will talk about groups in a bit, and I moved stuff around, but it stays one object. If I use this selection tool, if I double click, it becomes, I can actually go into that group and change objects inside. What else? We have this. The rotate tool is just a better way to rotate stuff. If I select something here, let's see, then I can specify the exact rotation. There's a preview, you can always preview the things. Reflect, similar, you can imagine what it does. Double click, you get the menu, by the way. Scale, very similar. We will talk about this more, of course. There's another tool, it's called the width, and there's loads of ways in how you can use that. Width tool, it affects the width of your stroke, for example. Create quite interesting effects. If you click Alt, you can actually change it to just one side. The warp tool, it's also interesting. Really change things very strangely with that. It's really just a matter of like playing around, and they all have like, of course, menus, different menus on how to use it and how strong the effect is, in which direction it rotates, and so on. This is pretty awesome. This just squeezes things together. You can create very interesting stuff. Bloat tool is the opposite. It just expands things like blobs. Yeah, there are loads of stuff. Crystalline tool. Crystalline adds these crazy deformations to it. Yeah, there's a lot to play with it. The wrinkle tool, I never used that. Yeah, it creates also like an effect on the free transform, very useful tool as well. Free transform transforms either the whole object. Rotation with shift, you can always check if it's uniform. And then you have again different ways to use it. Either perspective distortion, then it changes one side, it scales one side, or free transform means each point can be moved. And we talk about the bounding box. There is a very important aspect to the bounding box. I think I want to show you this because that's where a lot of people give up. For example, I have a star and I have this rounded corner and I want to align them. But I want to align them in a certain way. So for example, I want to align this inner anchor point with an anchor point on here. Now the problem is how to do that. There's no way to do that. I could try to fit it somehow, and actually, yeah, I can choose that anchor point here. But it's not always that simple. You can turn off the bounding box. Hide bounding box actually sometimes helps, because now I can really choose whatever I want to, on how I want to move my object and align it with another object. Very useful, and a lot of people don't actually know that. Turn it back on, the bounding box. Transform tool, we talked about this. The shape builder, we can talk about another time. Also the perspective grid tool, we're talking about another time. Mesh tool is same. Gradient tool, yes, we can quickly touch on the gradient tool. I can click here and now if I, for example, have a object selected, I choose the gradient tool. Opala, that was very strange. Yeah, I click into the object and then it automatically chooses a gradient. That doesn't have to be the final gradient you want to choose. Also, you have the option to change the type of gradient. Is it from the center? Is it a freeform gradient? Very interesting. Or is it a line? You can change the gradient directly here. That's quite interesting. You can also change the rotation. You can also change the color. You can eyedrop certain aspects from one object to the other. So I can select this here, or even the text. For example, I want to have this gradient in this object. So then I can just choose the eyedropper and create this gradient within these objects here. Pretty neat. There's a measure tool, we can talk about another time. There's a blend tool. This all goes too far for beginners, I would say. But yeah, you know, always play with everything. That's what I do. I just play with it and then see what comes up. There's also symbol spray tool. That's quite interesting. If you have symbols, it's worth a separate video, of course. The column graph tool and slice tool. This is not slicing your objects, but it's for web design. I will not touch that really. I never really used it. You have the pan tool, panning, but panning is also possible with the pressed wheel button, and you have a zoom tool, which can be used either with Alt and click, or just like moving the mouse with the left mouse button clicked. That also works. If you work on a certain artboard and you want to make it bigger, then you can also use the Ctrl-0 shortcut, and it just maximizes the artboard. There's also other ways to draw, either behind or in front, and then you can change the screen mode. You can go in presentation. With escape you can go out. You can try these other ones here. Now I want to very quickly, before we conclude this video with a more fun exercise, I want to show you something about the layers, because that's also something people might need to get used to. This is a bit different as in Photoshop, the layer and how to use the layers. So at the moment everything is in one layer. I could, for example, choose everything with the same appearance. Now you can see all of these are selected. If I would have now another layer, for example like this, I can just go here on this small dot and move it up and move it to the other layer. That means in my current layer now here is everything else, and in here are just the lines. So moving objects within layers from one layer to another means that you need to select it. Now it's selected, this thing is selected, or you select it here. You can move it also like this, but much easier is just to use it here. So because sometimes you don't want to open the layer, and it's also very hard to find, especially when layers become much larger and then you have like hundreds of lines in here. It's gonna be hard to move things like that. That's why if you choose something like this and you know it's in that layer, want to have it in the other layer or in another layer, then you just move it like this and you have it in another layer. Now this object is only here. I think that's already a lot, and I thought let's make some nice art as a concluding example. For that I will create a new artwork. I choose A3, and that's really a fun thing to do. Document setup. I want to have this actually a portrait mode, and you can do that with any image, but of course it works better with. So this is a very simple exercise. We're not drawing much here, but I will just show you another aspect of Illustrator which is really interesting, just as a teaser for all the other videos to come. Okay, so for example we choose something. What are we choosing here? Or maybe we go here in the community feed. I like this. I would just copy this and I would just place it here. Oh, actually it created its own artboard. I don't need that artboard anymore. Now I can delete that artboard and have my other artboard. That means now you see it created its own artboard, which is pretty awesome. This is a raster graphic. It's not a vector graphic, and it's very simple. It's already suggesting to trace the image. I would just place this file and it says trace the image. Alright, so I could trace it. That was pretty fast. It's not very spectacular really. I can go in here into image trace panel and look what's going on here. So the preset is default, it's just a black and white, but I can actually go into here and say please draw it in with 16 colors, 6 colors, shades of gray, sketched art, and so on. I just choose something like the 16 colors. Ho, this is something different. Okay, color mode, choose grayscale. I could have a limited color palette. You have all other ways to do it here. You can also create just the outline, or advanced. There's an advanced mode also. What can you do now with this thing? Now this is a vector graphic, changed from a photo to a vector graphic. How do I know that? If I click in here, it says image trace. I could go now here, the same what I did before in the shaper tool. I could go and expand, and now you see that all of these objects have their own outline here. It's a group still. Now what I could do is, for example, I could go here and go into Artboard, and with Alt I can actually create a copy of this. Let's go back 1 second. I will go back to the image trace result. I will now create a new artboard because I want to be able to modify that. So I could have different options for that result here. So if I go out of the artboard and now go to the trace result for this, so I can choose only 3 colors, for example, 6 colors. So it combines some of the areas. I could also go even lower and say, can you choose just please only two colors is a bit little, maybe 3 colors, 3 or 4 colors. Paths, maybe lower paths, so it's less detail, less corners, less noise. There's more noise actually. No, it's less. So we went from here. Let's make another artboard here. Okay. Went from here to here to here, and we could of course rearrange them. That was a mistake. Okay, we went from this to this, and we could now, for example, expand this here. We're gonna again use this as a new artboard, and then very fun thing to do, we can go here to recolor the artwork and choose different colors. And there are loads of ways to deal with it. You can always reset. Or you go into the advanced options and really change each color. We can still change the stroke for all of them. For example, we could select all of them and change the stroke color. And by now I'm just playing. You get the point. Oh, yeah. It's quite fascinating. Don't wanna get too crazy. I just wanna show you that it's all about playing around, really. I could also remove these, not necessarily useful. You can still recolor it if you want. Alright, I hope you liked this first. Oh, forgot 1 second. Now, see, you have these. We have these 2 artboards. Now we can export. And export as, in that case, if you now go here, you choose whatever you want as a format, use artboard, and then you can choose which artboard you want, the range, in that case number 2, and then it will export that artboard in the correct size. Speaking of size, you might want to turn on the ruler so you actually see how big everything is, and in the ruler you can also see the units. So if I go with the right click here on the ruler, I see which unit I'm working in, and you can change that. You can look at pixel, points, millimeter, and so on. You can also place your 0 point to the artboard. If I click here in the corner and go here, then I know, okay, then I can measure how big that image is in terms of the units. Just as a mention on the side. Alright, cool. I guess that's it. Yeah, I hope you like this first kind of introduction, and we will do a lot of more stuff in here. See you in the next video.